Hello, and welcome to The Global Current, where Seton Hall's diplomacy students give you a fresh look at what's new around the world. I'm Karina Taylor.
And I'm Alex Krause.
In news this week,
elections in rebel-held Ukraine.
Fighting rages in Benghazi, Libya.
Taliban attacks erupt on the Pakistan-India border.
And in analysis, riots in Burkina Faso and West African stability.
And a panel of diplomacy students share their study abroad experiences.
Thanks for tuning in and enjoy the show.
And now, Karina Hendren reports on the recent rebel elections in Ukraine.
On Sunday, October 2nd, voters in eastern Ukraine participated in elections for members of parliament and prime ministers in the pro-Russian separatist provinces of Donetsk and Luhansk. The elections were denounced by Kiev, the EU, and other Western governments, but were supported by Russia. Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko claimed that the vote was an electoral farce, and both Kiev and the West claimed that the elections violated the Minsk deal signed on September 5th. The Minsk agreements called for the election of local officers under Ukrainian law, but ruled out any attempt to create a union with Russia in any eastern provinces. Russia maintains that none of the points decided in Minsk were violated and that they will back whoever is elected. Alexander Zakharchenko, the current prime minister of the self-proclaimed People's Republic of Donetsk, claimed victory in the election, winning 765,350 votes. In Luhansk, Igor Platinsky was elected prime minister with 63% of the vote. The head of the Central Election Commission in Luhansk said that more than 500,000 people voted in more than 100 polling stations. CNN reports that voters were brought to the polls by the promise of free or discounted fruits and vegetables. Many also turned out in the hope that a democratic election would stop the violence. A schoolteacher who identified herself to a CNN reporter by only her first name, Tatiana, said, "That day and night we hear shots. Yes, they bomb us. Yes, we have bomb shelters and basements. But we don't want to go back there. That is why we are preparing for the elections and hope for something better." In a statement to the press, Zakharchenko had this to say.
A breakaway republic in eastern Ukraine. Kiev called the vote in the Russian-speaking region a farce. It's the latest twist in the standoff with Moscow over the future of the former Soviet state.
Kiev must come to terms with the fact that Donbass is no longer a part of Ukraine. It is self-evident.
These elections have put a strain on the relationship between Russia and the West, the Wall Street Journal reports. The Russian Foreign Ministry stated that it respected the will expressed by the population in the southeast of Ukraine, while U.S. officials said that if Russia supported these actions, that it would carry a cost. On Sunday, Samantha Power, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, tweeted that U.S. will not recognize any election in separatist areas that doesn't follow Ukrainian law and is not held with the consent of the Ukrainian government. EU member states are also speaking out against the elections. A spokesperson for Angela Merkel said, "It is incomprehensible that there are official Russian voices either respecting or recognizing these so-called elections." Federica Mogherini, in her first newspaper interview as the High Representative of the EU for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, told The Guardian that these elections, which were supported by Moscow and denounced almost everywhere else, were a grave setback to the chances of Russia and Ukraine reaching a deal on the country's future structure. This is Karina Hendren for The Global Current.
Dominique DiMarzio reports on continued fighting in Benghazi.
The major Libyan commercial port of Benghazi has been closed due to ongoing fighting between Islamist militants and pro-government forces struggling to retake the area. A port official told Reuters on Tuesday that all ship movements and discharging of imports have been stopped. The Benghazi port is a vital terminal for eastern Libya, as it serves as an important conduit for food and fuel supplies to the eastern part of the country. This comes after fierce fighting erupted in the city on Monday, with pro-government forces launching an attack on areas held by the Islamist militants. Reuters stated that earlier the army had asked residents to evacuate before a military operation to avoid casualties. Dozens of people left the city, but many had nowhere to go, so they joined the security forces in the fight against the militants. A week ago, the pro-government forces recaptured army camps seized by the Islamists, including territories in South and East Benghazi. A commander with the government forces had this to say to a Reuters reporter.
Now we finished combing and cleaning more than 70% of Benghazi. These areas are full of terrorists, and we have them completely surrounded.
According to the news group, the battle is part of a wider conflict in Libya, where former rebels who helped oust the former leader, Muammar Gaddafi, are fighting for power and a share of Libya's large oil revenues. Medics who spoke to Reuters say at least 250 people have been killed since the offensive began. Libya is currently split between rival tribes and political factions. Two governments are competing for power and legitimacy. One of them is an armed group from the western city of Misrata, who seized the capital Tripoli in August, while the other is the internationally recognized elected government, led by Prime Minister Abdullah al-Thani. Al-Thani's government had to flee the capital after militias took control in July. It aims to move to Benghazi, Libya's second largest city, once army units restore security there, its deputy speaker told Reuters on Tuesday. This is Dominique DiMarzio for the Global Current.
Gabby Hunt reports on a recent explosion on the Pakistan-India border.
On Sunday, November 2nd, a deadly explosion on the Pakistan-India border killed at least 55 people and injured over 150, according to Al Jazeera. The explosion happened shortly after the end of a popular flag-lowering ceremony, a ceremony which attracts spectators from both India and Pakistan. Almost immediately after the blast, a Taliban splinter group has cited responsibility on the basis of revenge for Pakistani military operations in Waziristan and the loss of fighters there. Despite the Taliban's loss of regional power since the death of Osama bin Laden, the splinter group, called Jamaat al-Ahrar, officially formed in late August 2014. Just last month, the group's leader, Omar Khalid al-Khorasani, called for a truce in Iraq and the Levant. Little information exists to completely explain this call for action, and it is unclear whether it is in regard to recent activity by ISIL, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, or in regard to ISIL relations in general with Jamaat al-Ahrar. For now, it seems to be a call for unification of Mujahideen forces. Although a definitive target was initially unclear, as casualties were both Indian and Pakistani, it now seems the attack was directed at both groups. According to Reuters, another spokesperson for the group, Ahsanullah Ahsan, has warned Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi that an attack on India is in the future. Overall, Jamaat al-Ahrar's identity has become high-profile via recent events, but its complete modus operandi remains obscure. This is Gabby Hunt reporting for Global Current.
Michael Ian Alfo discusses the effects on West African stability after the military takeover in Burkina Faso.
On Friday, October 31st, the longtime leader of Burkina Faso, Blaise Compaoré, stepped down after 27 years in power. This was after protest erupted because of Compaoré's attempts to remain in power by scheduling for Parliament to vote on changing the constitution, by which he could run for another term. The vote never took place, and, according to the Washington Post, the building that houses Parliament was set on fire by protesters. Blaise Compaoré resigned from the presidency shortly after. According to CBS News, Lieutenant Colonel Isaac Yacoba Zida is now in charge. The situation in Burkina Faso has gathered a lot of international attention. This landlocked West African country has had a significant impact on the stability of the region. According to the Washington Post, a U.S. base in Ouagadougou, operating since 2007, operates as a hub for a U.S. spying network in the region. This has allowed the United States to fly over neighboring countries in the region in search of al-Qaeda fighters. The African country has also been an important ally to its former ruler, France. With insecurity now gripping this once stable country, the international community is wondering how the region will be affected. The situation in Burkina Faso may also pose a warning to other African leaders who have been in power for a long time and are trying to remain in power. According to the Malay Mail online newspaper, International Crisis Group representative Thierry Vircolon reports, "It is a warning both to aging regimes and for those trying to stay in power beyond constitutional limit." She also made the following statement. During the Arab Spring, the question was whether Africa will have its own spring. Perhaps the attempts to change the constitutions will lead to it now. Burkina Faso is not the first African country whose leaders attempted to keep power by changing constitutional procedures. In fact, today there are at least 5 countries that are considering changing their laws to allow their leaders more time in office. In the past, these attempts to retain power have usually been successful. The Washington Post reports that the re-election rate of African leaders since the 1990s has been 75%. The situation in Burkina Faso may have several effects in Africa. Burkina Faso is setting a precedent for other African leaders as they start to second-guess whether it is wise to try and maintain power. More ambitiously, the incident may bring about a wider movement for democracy in the region. Pierre Engelhardt, professor of African politics and development at Pomona College, commented to the Washington Post that in Burkina Faso, it now looks like citizens are making forceful demands for respect of democratic rules. Just as during the Arab Spring in the Middle East, the youth of Burkina Faso have played a major part in facilitating the process that led to the president's ouster.
The youth especially say that they have no prospects, and it's really about the youth and the people asking for economic prospects, for jobs.
Advances in democracy have allowed for quick communication between people from all across the globe. These global communications have led to social changes, threatening the status quo everywhere. While the situation in Burkina Faso does send a cautionary message to long-standing African leaders, many African countries have a tradition of aggressive authoritarian leadership. Thierry Virculin believes that the state of mind of the people will be one of the biggest factors in determining whether a pro-democracy movement arises in Africa. Experts believe that the changes happening in Burkina Faso have potential to cause a widespread movement in the region. When asked about whether or not the situation could cause change in the region, Neil Akuta of the African Immigrant Caucus explained on PBS NewsHour,
I think what it does say is that there are people, frankly, the ordinary people in many African countries are yearning to have the power to throw out their leaders if they don't like them. Usually these leaders are allies of powerful countries outside. So for me it says that such other countries as Rwanda, Uganda, DRC, they bear watching, because you never know when the people will gain the upper hand.
Still, there are obstacles to a successful continent-wide movement that must be overcome, especially in the way Africans perceive their country and the undemocratic laws that dictate their system of government. Paul Melly from Britain's Chatham House explained to Malay Mail that authoritarian traditions are still influential in some countries, and in addition, few would bet against Kagame, president of Rwanda, or Congo-Brazzaville's Denis Sassou Nguesso successfully pushing through a rule change to open their way to further terms of office. For now, the world will just have to wait and see what happens in Burkina Faso and the region as a whole. Ultimately, it will be up to the people of each country to decide whether or not they want change. This is Michael Iannalfo for the Global Current.
One of the foundations of the Seton Hall School of Diplomacy and International Relations is the integration of international experiences into the education of every student. Associate producer Daniel Garay sat down with a panel of diplomacy students to discuss their recent study abroad experiences and how their understanding of global affairs was shaped by their time abroad.
Studying abroad, as told by many, is a great way not only to boost a resume, but to expand one's horizons and perhaps put some language skills to use. For students of international relations, it is a way for them to apply what they've learned in the classroom to practicality. Here I sit down with 3 students that have studied abroad, 1 for an entire year, 1 last spring semester, and 1 last summer. Hello guys, go ahead and introduce yourselves and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Eliza Rizvi, and I am a senior diplomacy and international relations student, and I just studied abroad in Sevilla, Spain.
Hi, my name is Brittany Emmett. I am a senior diplomacy and international relations student, and I just studied in Oman this summer studying Arabic.
Hi guys, my name is Bjorn Schwarzenbach. I'm also a student of diplomacy here at Seton Hall. I spent the last 2 semesters in Switzerland.
In most cases, after students have studied abroad, it has a lasting impact on their lives. And from these experiences and from your time abroad, was it worth it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a very enriching experience, and it just really helps you to open up and learn about new cultures just by immersion.
I definitely think that it was worth it. Not only for me did it expand my knowledge of the Middle East, but it really gave a diverse perspective as to what the Middle East is as a whole, because oftentimes we don't really understand it in America, and I really got to practice my Arabic too.
I definitely think it's worth it, actually, because spending a year abroad in Switzerland was awesome because I got to learn about their political system and just the current events with their relations with their domestic politics, the relations with the European Union, which is a great application of what we've learned at school.
Many people have dreams of going abroad, whether it is vacation or going there as a place to live. For your studied abroad experiences, did it feel like home or did it feel like a vacation?
I think for me personally, being in Oman, the second that I touched down, it sounds kind of silly, but I definitely felt extremely at home, even being thousands of miles away from where I grew up and from where I go to school now. I felt so welcomed wherever I went, and I really made lasting relationships and feel like I have family in the Middle East now.
I mean, I would definitely say that spending 2 semesters abroad was definitely more of a home experience for me. I mean, I got to integrate so much into my school community, and I was living with Swiss people. I wasn't living with foreigners or other study abroaders. So, I mean, integrating was just an awesome experience for me, personally.
And when you stayed in these countries for an extended period of time, you are subject to the nation's domestic, economic, political, and social issues. What was your experiences with these issues?
I can say from firsthand experience, it was extremely interesting and quite difficult acclimating to Omani culture, in that most women are covered from head to toe, and during the summer with 100+ degree weather, it is very difficult, but it was definitely a learning experience. And when you truly do try to adjust to the culture and try to understand why things are the way they are, not based on what you hear in the news at home, that you really do get to understand and apply your knowledge to when you come back home.
So Spain's unemployment rate is around 27%, and it really affected the economy, but also the standard of living and how people choose to live. You don't see a lot of industry in the south, which is where I was, but as a result, you see people mostly working in the service industry, and that's where you get to meet a lot of people. So, you see a lot of people as waiters and people hanging around, and you wonder to yourself, where's the industry, where's the corporate titans? But I think that really goes to show how the economic state is in Spain at the moment.
Now, as you guys moved over to these countries, what were some adjustments you had to make in your daily lives, in your speaking skills that you had to go through?
Language adjustments and cultural adjustments, I think for me, were obviously extremely difficult because the language of Arabic is so crazy for an English speaker as is, but I hadn't practiced Arabic for a year prior to going to Oman, so I cried a couple times the first week, I cannot lie, because it was so difficult. But with the intensive program that I was in, I was able to be constantly using my Arabic. It wasn't just in the classroom. I had to use it when I was going to the restaurants. Like Eliza had said, I had to use it with my friends. I met some amazing Omani girls that I would go and hang out with at the mall, and we would practice our Arabic together. So it was definitely difficult, 100%, but it was so worth it.
In Switzerland, the respective time and punctuality is so much different than elsewhere that really, if the train's on time, you were expected to be very much on time, if not early.
Yeah, when I got to Spain, it was sort of having to do a 360-degree shift in my thinking, in the sense that obviously with the language, I had to really adapt and make sure that I was absorbing what everyone was saying to me and picking up and I used to write down vocabulary in a little book so that I could go home and remember it the next day. But I guess culturally, it was that the Spanish people just have a very relaxed lifestyle. They really enjoy sitting outside and sipping their coffee and their beer and chatting for hours. And me, having grown up on the East Coast where everything is just so go, everyone's busy, rushing around, I think it was just a really good reminder, and it was very refreshing to just be reminded of the fact that it's good to slow down occasionally, and it's good to embrace life around you and sort of experience what everyone else is doing.
I would agree with that, with what you were saying in regards to slowing down. I mean, in Oman, there's only one telephone system that you use, and there's not any Wi-Fi really anywhere. And I was actually there during the World Cup, and it was incredible because we would be sitting in a restaurant, and there would just be projectors all over the street. It was called Souk Al Khud, and we would just be sitting around, and all of us would be cheering on the USA, or they'd be cheering on Germany, or we'd all just be together. And it was a really wonderful bonding experience, and really, I guess, allowed us all to see what the Omanis really love to do, and it's just to spend time with each other. And family is everything there as well, which was really refreshing for me to see, because I think that we often lose sight of spending time with the ones that we love, and so I really appreciated that.
From the languages you've studied, why did you pick your country, and would you recommend it?
I will answer first. Actually, this is a funny story because it has to do with Eliza as well. I was looking to study abroad for Arabic. I had always had a fascination with North Africa and the Middle East since I was a very, very little girl. I can remember from age 2. I was obsessed. And I was looking into different summer programs, and I was initially looking at Jordan, and then all the Jordan programs filled up, and I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? And Eliza was in Sevilla at the time, and I had Skyped her, and I was like, I don't know which program, the Morocco program or the Oman program. And she just immediately was like, you need to go to Oman. And I was like, what? Why Oman? I don't know anything about it. And then she's like, that's why you need to go. And I went, and it was the most incredible experience ever. And so I credit Eliza a lot for that. And it was wonderful. And it taught me so much about a different part of the Middle East that I knew nothing about previously.
I had studied German here in the States, and I wanted to just see Switzerland, and I wanted to study abroad there because my father's from there, and I didn't really know Switzerland that much growing up. But I mean, just the way that there are 3 or 4 separate languages, 3 distinct separate cultures, and how they all function in a very effective state is just amazing. And being a student of political science, economics, and diplomacy, that integration and that cohesive state functioning was really interesting to see. Their relationship with the European Union, their relationship with the rest of the world, being a very neutral state since the birth of their country, has been really interesting because it's continually developing, and being in country different political developments happening. It was a great place. But I would definitely recommend Switzerland if you're studying French, Italian, or German, quite honestly, because you can see all the other cultures right in Switzerland.
Studying Spanish, I could have gone to a lot of places, but especially in Latin America. But for some reason, I knew that I wanted to be in Europe. I wanted to be able to travel quite easily, and I thought that Spain really afforded me that opportunity the best out of all the countries that I was looking at. Also, having studied Arabic for a little while, I really liked that Spain was this crossroads between Arabic and European culture, and it was just sort of this meeting point where I was able to get a lot of Arab culture, but also experience, the Spanish way of life and learn their dialect of Spanish. So it just proved to be the best fit for me, and I couldn't have picked a better choice.
So then I guess just to top everything off, what was your favorite part of studying abroad?
I loved, personally, the traveling part. Since I was in Spain, it was, so easy to just book a Ryanair or an EasyJet flight and get from one end of Europe to the next. I remember one time I just booked a flight to Belgium on a whim, and I was there in under 2 hours, and it was such a complete change to go from the south of Spain to, a primarily French-speaking country, and it was a really great opportunity to see, so many different aspects of Europe as well. But I think perhaps the most rewarding experience about studying abroad was just the connections that I made, and I think it really goes to show that, you know, humanity is so interconnected regardless of language, religion, culture. I think, you know, studying abroad really helped me to understand that and just sort of gain an appreciation for human connection.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite part of being in Oman, that is like the most difficult question I can answer, but I would have to say just that, like what Eliza was saying, the connections that I made and the people that I spent my time with, I was so fortunate to be able to to make personal connections with people to where I was able to travel around the country and was able to go to different places and learn so much. It was a very, I guess I would call it, like, in every sense of the word, healing experience for me. Just the culture itself was just incredible, and I was able to go to so many different forts and really get to see the history. And I went to this very, very southernmost part of Oman, which is by Saudi Arabia and Yemen. But it's called Salalah, and it's the frankincense capital of the world. And everywhere you go, it smells like frankincense, and it's like a tropical rainforest. And you would never think that in the Middle East, but it was absolutely beautiful, and the people were so different from the north. But it was just such an incredible experience. So I think that was something extremely rewarding.
Yeah, I mean, just the different experiences you get and the people you meet, it was really easy to integrate. As long as you're willing and you're going with an open mind, you can join the different student organizations on campus. I got to play in a couple different orchestras, but it was so nice to like play my violin in these amateur orchestras, playing these awesome concerts in awesome little churches around Switzerland. I remember like having like 9 hours a week towards the end of the season in concert rehearsals, and then being able to like during the breaks like speak German and practice my German with my colleagues, and that was just a great experience. And then also being in Switzerland was absolutely amazing because Bern is very more traditional, Germanically traditional. The culture, the language, of course, the architecture and the streets. But when you go an hour to Lausanne and then an hour and a half to Geneva, it's totally Frankified. And then seeing Eliza in Belgium on a whim, that was amazing because I was there for something, then she came up and visited. I mean, being able to meet your friends they've met in college halfway around the world. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was also just really enjoyable to be around so many internationally minded people. I think that was just a great way to meet so many expats and people who just had an appreciation for traveling and experiencing the world. And for me, that was just one of the most valuable experiences that I will ever have in my life. And I think it's just allowed me to just have this thirst and this passion to keep traveling and keep meeting people like that, because it just goes to show that, if you want to travel, you can and you will find a way, and there will always be people who, have a humble heart and are willing to help you even when you are a complete foreigner. And yep. I think that is just a really beautiful thing about traveling.
Definitely. I actually, I met some people in Oman that were members of the church that I go to, and it was the craziest thing ever because I was talking to one of these women. She was like, "Oh yeah, so you're from Arizona, what part?" And I was like, "Gilbert." She's like, "My son lives there." I was in Oman, I was in the Middle East, and I was like, "Are you serious? Like, how is this possible?" And so it just goes to show how interconnected everyone is, and what Lisa was saying about about just like the appreciation for travel and for experiencing different cultures. I think that's so crucially important.
All right, well, thank you for sharing your study abroad experience with us. Thanks for stopping by.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you for having
us.
This has been Daniel Garay for The Global Current.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of The Global Current. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And be sure to visit us on blogs.shu.edu/globalcurrent. I'm Alex Krause.
And I'm Karina Taylor.
And we'll see you next week.
The Global Current is brought to you by the School of Diplomacy and International Relations at Seton Hall University. Our executive producer is Bill Golba. Our co-executive producers are Daniel Garay and Alicia Charabali. Our technical producer is Evan Doolittle. Our news and analysis editors are Gabriela Taveras and Catherine Beatty. The theme song is Acid Jazz by Kevin MacLeod. This has been the Global Current on WSOU, Seton Hall's Pirate Radio.